for what I've been able to do with with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
More Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
He wants to get away with, get rid of the ability of Medicare for the ability for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies.
There are going to be discussion about whether he should continue.
There is no two ways about it. That was not a good debate for Joe Biden.
Joe Biden's job was to reassure them tonight. His job was to calm his party, to make them feel that, yes, I can do this. He did not do that. He did the opposite of that. He made them more panicked.
I think there's a lot of people who are going to want to see him consider taking a different course now.
Well, you saw it last night. Democrats in full-blown panic mode this morning, with the media headlines spelling very bad news. Look at New York Times, a fumbling performance and a panicking party. Axios, Biden's debate, a DEFCON 1 moment for Democrats. Daily Beast, Joe Biden mumbles and stumbles the Democrats into crisis. And Politico goes this far. WTF. Panic Dems start looking for alternatives to Biden.
I mean, we can go through the whole debate and what if he should run, what would he do as a future president? But I think the conversation has to start with the now. He's the current president of the United States. Who's running the country? I've been saying for months, who's writing the note cards? Who's putting the stuff in the teleprompter? Who's giving the president the talking points? Who's running the country when he decides that he's going to take 7 days off, or when he decides to take a 4-day weekend almost every single week? Who is doing it? And now we know it's clearly, based on the performance last night, it's not him.
They say Dems are facing a crescendo of pushing Biden to resign as the nominee. A fear of Trump will push Joe out. Claire McCaskill, the former senator from Missouri, says, we call this a crisis. Biden comes back and said, well, it's hard to debate a liar. And he said, I think I did well last night. That, to me, is an indication where he's not going anywhere. And I thought Ari Fleischer made a great point. He just said, for us, this is the Joe Biden we've been seeing. For many people on the Democratic side, and possibly some of the 73 million that watch, they haven't been seeing that. Mm-hmm. And for us, we'll go, yeah, I've been telling you that. And for them, they're saying, where did this come from? Perhaps. Let's bring in Steve Doocy, who's at a secure location at the Jukebox Diner over in Virginia, and Rachel Campos Duffy, who's over in the swing state of Georgia. And I should say swing state of Virginia now, Steve,
that's true.
Because we're in a dead heat for the last 3 polls in Virginia.
That's right. And, well, keep in mind, Joe Biden in 2020 won Virginia by 10. And before that, Hillary Clinton won Virginia against Donald Trump by, I think, 4 or 5, something like that. And this morning here at the Jukebox Diner, I've been talking to people about the disaster that was last night, and they all saw it. You know, all the White House and the campaign had to do was to get enough of Joe Biden so they could cut him up into little sound bites and do a TikTok so that, low information voters would see that. And it's like, oh, he had a great presidential debate. Well, good luck to the people doing the editing this morning. I challenge them to find a good 60 seconds of him, because for so many times he was just incomprehensible. He would start here and you would think that he had a train of thought, but then he'd meander off. Ultimately, I think what we saw last night was something historic. That debate will be talked about for generations. It will actually replace, back in 1960, when it was Richard Nixon who was all sweaty in that first debate against John F. Kennedy, because this was the most disastrous performance in TV presidential history. And you know what? That is the view of Democrats.
Yeah. Rachel Campos Duffy, last night I felt like I had to order a miracle ear because I could not understand what Joe Biden was saying. I was like, quiet down, everyone. I made my dogs quiet. I put them out. I'm like, is this going to be the whole time?
Yeah, I told you last I told you in the last hit, the whoever was doing closed caption needs to get a bonus. I mean, they didn't know what he was saying, but now we know why they kept him in the basement for so long, why they controlled his schedule, why they sent him out to the beach, and he had no choice here. They bring him out, they take off the training wheels, and guess what happens? He's on his own, no help, and this is what you get. And again, this question of what do the Democrats do now? You talk about the panic mode. I saw a tweet by Ben Rhodes. Remember, he was a very close Obama advisor, speechwriter. This guy is not going to say anything on Twitter without having run it by the Obama team, who we know is running the show and is behind the scenes here. Here's what Ben Rhodes says. He says, this is on X, he says, telling people they didn't see what they saw is not the way to respond. So if you have any question about what the Obama people want, what the power brokers want, they want him off the stage. But Jill Biden last night, when they went to the Waffle House after the debate, when Joe Biden clearly looked like he was ready for bed, she was out there cheering and saying, "You did great. You answered all the questions." And then she did a fundraising video. So this is a big dilemma for the Obama, the Valerie Jarrett, and that team. Jill Biden is going to make it very difficult, and that's the question. Will they actually be able to push the Bidens off the stage? I think that's the biggest question out there right now.
The debate was late last night. It started at 9 o'clock. So if you had to fall asleep and get up early for work, we have some highlights and some lowlights of the CNN presidential debate. Watch this.
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president and what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall.
I gave him an unbelievable situation.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters, but we are not for late-term abortion, period. The idea that I have to apologize to you for anything along the line. We've done more for veterans than any president has in American history.
Our veterans and our soldiers can't stand this guy. They can't stand him.
More Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now.
But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon. He's going to drive us into World War III.
You want a World War III, let him follow and win, and let Putin say, do what you want, NATO. He wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies.
All of these things. We're in a failing nation, but it's not going to be failing anymore. We're going to make it great again.
Well, one part of the game plan was he wanted to blame Trump for inflation by saying, you left me a mess with the economy. Part of his game plan was to say, yeah, Afghanistan, for some reason, he brought it up on his own. But he also brought up the fact that he said nobody died. So under my presidency, what about the 13 who died at Abbey Gate and the 2 dozen that were wounded? He also points out that Vladimir Putin is basically a friend of his and you want to get out of NATO. He never said he wanted to get out of NATO. We wanted to play their fair share. And Vladimir Putin took Georgia during Bush's years, a piece of Georgia during Bush's years. He took Crimea during Obama's years. He took nothing during the Trump years. And this guy signed off on Nord Stream 2, which he got away without acknowledging last night either. So him going off and saying he's a friend of Vladimir Putin, that is not going to be an effective attack on foreign policy. I was relieved we brought up anything on foreign policy.
Well, he also, Brian, said that there was no terrorists across the border as well.
Which is crazy. Look at the FBI terror list.
There's been stuff that's out there for the public to see, fold attacked and all that. I just have a bold prediction, and I'm willing to go out there with it. I think this is going to be the only presidential debate. I think this is it.
I heard people last night agreeing with you on that.
I don't think that I think the message that you're going to hear from the Trump camp is mercy rule.
Yeah.
I think the former president is going to say, I can't do this. I think it's a waste of the American people's time. We've seen everything that we needed to see. And they're going to say, I'm bullying him if I continue with someone that can't even complete sentences. And to that degree, I kind of agree with him. There was a moment where you saw the old Donald Trump would have attacked harder. And you saw him biting his tongue. You saw his facial expressions holding back. And I think because of that, Ainsley, he's not going to show up for the rest of
The only problem with that is if Donald Trump says, I'm not going to have this next debate, which is in September, close to the election. We're in June right now. People might forget this performance. I mean, I'm glad that they continuously.
This was so bad.
They won't forget it completely, but it might not be in the forefront of their mind, and no telling what will happen between now and then. Now, Trump did make some good points on foreign policy. He was talking about Afghanistan, and he talked about how bad he was, and he said Putin is watching this. No generals were fired. We left American citizens behind. Putin says, okay, well, now's my chance to go in, just like Hamas with Israel. Iran was broke, he said, and this is why we had no terror when I was in office.
Steve, I actually don't think he's going anywhere. And one of the reasons is he's going to make the decision. He's got the delegates, Joe Biden, and he also picked the delegates. So Joe Biden's going to say, don't worry, they just don't like us. We're going to prove them wrong again. But the big push is going to come from the Senate candidates. Casey's got to be sweating in Pennsylvania. Tester's got to be having a coronary over in Montana. This is going to hurt the down ballot, don't you think?
Well, that was exactly what I was going to talk about, because as the party elders on the Democratic side start to talk about what a disaster last night was for their party and their president, it's an existential threat to any down-ballot Democrat, because what down-ballot Democrat is going to be able to energize their base to the point where they're going to show up on November 5th to vote for a guy who could not finish a thought? You know, there are a lot of people who watched last night as being historic, and they're thinking this morning, you know, Joe Biden just toe-tagged his own presidency, because that simply does not fly. And for the White House to say, oh, he had a cold. I just got a note from my ENT, and he said, a cold? You mean like a stuffy nose? Was he blowing his nose? They are not clapping for a stuffy nose. Glenn Youngkin just walked in. I'm not a doctor, but I'm playing one on TV. It was not a cold. We finally got to see Joe Biden as the White House sees him every day. And there's a reason why they have kept Joe Biden away from the White House press corps for the most part, and that is when you see him without a filter, you see what you saw last night. Hold on a second. Hey, Governor, can you keep it down? I'm trying to be on TV. Glenn Youngkin right over there. He's going to be with us in 10 minutes.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.